Baseball battled against Rio at home as softball hit the road. Men's and women's track and field battled at the WVU Stan Romanski Open. Pirates baseball is back. The Penguins keep losing, Steelers signings, and new league rules are put in place. And with baseball back, who will surprise us the most? It's time to come on down to the Pioneer Sideline. The Point Park University baseball team played a 3-game series against Rio Grande this past week. Game 1 was Saturday, and Point Park got off to a great start, taking the win 8-7. Game 2 and Game 3 were on Sunday. The Pioneers fell to the Red Storm in Game 2, 10-7. In this game, the lead changed up many times, with Point Park ahead 1-0 on the RBI single that Jordan Campbell hit in the second inning. Shortly after, they were ahead 2-1 on Chris Williams' RBI single in the third inning. In the fourth inning, Rio Grande was up ahead 3 after a couple of unearned runs. But in the sixth inning, Amar Murillo put the Pioneers back in the top 4-3 with a 2-run single. It all came down to a few key hits that Rio Grande got. They stole the lead back with a pair of runs in the top of the 8th. In the bottom half, Chris Williams and Jordan Campbell set Carlos Martinez's 2-run double, pushing the Pioneers up 6-5. Finally, in the 9th inning, the Red Storm had 5 runs and 5 hits, which made the win out of reach for the Pioneers. Moving on to the series' last game, Point Park swept the Red Storm 5-0. John Hawley and Ethan Parker combined on a shutout, and the Pioneers got key hitting in several of the innings. Point Park had action on the bases in every inning. When the Pioneers had the lead of 1-0 battling at the bottom of the 5th, it was a sacrifice fly by Isaac Santana. Santana sent a deep dive in the center field. Santana had another RBI on a base hit with 2 runners. 3 batters later, Macaulay Brito had a 2-run single and pushed things 4-0. Murillo's leadoff double in the 6th and Campbell's rip-up in the middle made the score 5-0. Murillo, Brito, and Eddie Javier Jr. had 2 hits each. PPU out-hit Rio 10-5. The Pioneers traveled to Lourdes in Ohio today to have a non-conference doubleheader. On March 29th and the 30th, the Pioneers are playing against Shawnee State for an RSC series. The Pioneers are currently 17-8 overall and 10-2 in the RSC. Good luck today and the rest of the week, boys. Switching gears over to the Point Park softball team as they have had a few games this past week. Going into Saturday, the Pioneers fell to Indiana Southeast in Game 1, 10-0, and fell in Game 2, 4-1. Going into a 2-game series against Midway played on Sunday, the Pioneers fell short in Game 1, 9-1, and won Game 2, 7-1. In the winning game against Midway, the Pioneers' offense scored 7 runs on 9 hits with a few of Midway's errors. Game 2 remained scoreless until the 4th inning, where the Eagles struck first. In the 5th inning, Point Park plated 4 runs. Junior Bella Maglocchio started with a leadoff single. PPU's offense had 9 hits. Sydney Reese led the offense, going 1 for 4 with 3 RBIs. Mia Arndt went 2 for 3, and Mara Ignema went 2 for 4 with an RBI. Other hits came from Taylor, Lee, Magliocco, Coy, and Chavez. The Pioneers are 8-12 overall and 4-8 in the RSC play. The Pioneers will be facing Carlo today in Pittsburgh at 3 and 5 p.m. Good luck, Pioneers. After the break, we recap the track meets from this past weekend. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's send things over to Hannah Bazet to recap the track team's results at the WVU Stan Romanski Open. Hannah?
Thanks, Nat. Our men's and women's track teams headed to the WVU Stan Romanowski Open this past Saturday. Braving the cold, our women's team brought the heat to the track. Sideline's own Natalia Hitlin brought home second place in the hurdles with her time of 14.88 seconds, followed by Emma Romer, who came in third with her time of 15.10 seconds and PR'd. The 400 hurdles saw 3 pioneers finish in the top 10, with Diamond Rush in 5th, Luchama Lubin in 9th, and Karen Rios in 10th. Rush also placed 7th in the 400 meters, followed by Romer in 11th. In the high jump, Nyla Rozier placed 6th in her debut, clearing 1.43 meters. Finally, Emma Pavlik led the pioneers in the javelin throw by Lena Single and Hannah Bond. Now moving on to our men's team, Kanye Mills hit the NAIAB qualifying mark in the 110 hurdles, beating his previous school record and brought home 3rd place. Mills also led in the 400 hurdles, placing 2nd with a time of 56.24 seconds. Demir Lomax placed 3rd in the 400 meters, running 50.91 seconds. He took home 8th place in the 400 hurdles as well. Akeem Mustafa placed 5th in the 200 meters, followed by Wesley Trower. Mustafa placed 7th in the 110 hurdles at 15.67 seconds. Finally, in the 1500 meters, Sideline's own Gabe Ebersole and Jordan Cullen competed and ran 5:05 and 5:14 respectfully. The Pioneers compete again March 29th and 30th at the Carnegie Mellon Invitational. We are so excited to see how they do. Back to you, Nat.
Thanks, Hannah. After the break, we hear about the rest of the sports world from this past week. Don't go anywhere.
Take them, cue them, open their mics.
Today marked the 1-year anniversary of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette strike.
Point Park University just hosted a campus-wide meeting.
Plans for the rapid transit bus line are not set to conclude until 2025.
Welcome back. Now I'll be sending things over to Mike Hodgetts for all things locally. Mike?
Thanks, Nat. There's one certainty for Tuesday night when the Carolina Hurricanes visit the Pittsburgh Penguins at 7. There will be a tribute video for Jake Guentzel. Guentzel returns to Pittsburgh as a visiting player less than 3 weeks after he was traded to the Hurricanes for Michael Bunting, prospects, and draft picks. Beyond that, the game is a matchup of teams moving in very different directions. The Penguins, who sit 30-30-10, seem to be on the verge of locking up a spot in the draft lottery, and Carolina, who sit 45-20-7, is in contention for everything from the Metropolitan Division crown to the President's Trophy. The Penguins are 3-9-2 in their past 14 games and are coming off yet another gut-wrenching loss. They built a 4-goal lead Sunday at Colorado, with Sidney Crosby logging a goal and 3 assists before the Avalanche scored 5 unanswered goals, including the winner in overtime for a 5-4 win. It was the Penguins' 6th loss this season when leading after 2 periods. Now the Penguins face a team in the same echelon standing-wise as Colorado, and they do it with the emotion of seeing Guentzel playing for the opposition. With the Penguins, Guentzel won a Stanley Cup, had 2 40-goal seasons, and established himself as a nearly perfect left winger for Crosby. Bunting has 3 goals, 6 points in 9 games with the Penguins as well. It will be seen how tonight's matchup will play out and the reaction Guentzel receives. The Pittsburgh Pirates and Miami Marlins square off for an opening day matchup at Lone Depot Park for kickoff of a 4-game series. The last time these clubs met, the 84-win Marlins clinched an NL wildcard berth in Pittsburgh under the tutelage of NL Manager of the Year Skip Schumacher. The Pirates, who lost 5 of 7 head-to-head matchups, improved by 14 wins from 2022 to 2023, finishing 76-86. Internal expectations are higher for the Pirates than they were last year, as they saw their 20-9 start in April and 29-28 finish over the final 2 months as signs they can play at a competitive pace. The good news is most of their core has been signed to long-term extensions, such as Brian Reynolds, Brian Hayes, and Mitch Keller. There's plenty of top prospects on the way, most notably last year's first overall pick, Paul Skeens, and they get O'Neal Cruz after he missed virtually all of 2023. It's reasonable to think better days are ahead, perhaps even in 2024. The question is, do they have enough start and pitching, and can this young core continue to grow together in the majors as we are 2 days away from opening day? In Steeler news, while everyone is talking about the new kickoff rule and hip drop tackles, another huge rule was passed by the NFL, and this one was proposed by the Pittsburgh Steelers. The league agreed to move the trade deadline out of 1 extra week from the end of the Week 8 games to the Tuesday after the Week 9 games. That means in 2024, the trade deadline will be November 5th. This news comes on the heels of a flurry of moves the Steelers made on the other end of transactions here in free agency, such as the newly signed Cordero Patterson to a 2-year, $6 million deal. The Steelers are looking to make some noise as we head into the 2024 NFL season. That's all for me this week. Now let's send things over to Matt Palangi to recap us on everything happening nationally. Matt?
Thanks, Mike. March is madnessing and brackets are busting. A lot to cover over this past week in college ball. We made it to the Sweet 16 of the Big Dance and so much has unfolded. Looking into the upsets, Horizon League champions the Oakland Golden Grizzlies completely outclassed the 3-seeded Kentucky Wildcats in the round of 64. The sixth man for the Grizzlies, Jack Golke, was in rhythm all day as he made 10 three-pointers and 2 free throws for 32 points in the victory. Oakland went on to lose to Big DJ Burns and the ACC champions NC State in the second round. The Ivy League embarrasses the SEC and a deep Auburn team. Yale was down by 6 at one point, but good shooting and some costly offensive possessions for Auburn led to an upset and Yale's second school win in the history of the tournament. Yale did proceed to lose in San Diego State in the round of 32. 12-seeded James Madison did pull off the 12 vs. 5 seed upset in the first round, but then Duke gave him a good old welcome to the big leagues to end JMU's incredible season with a score of 93-55. Speaking of Duke, every team in the ACC that was in the tournament besides Virginia, who lost in the first 4-in play-in game, is still alive. That includes 1-seed University of North Carolina, 4-seeded Duke, 6-seeded Clemson, and ACC tournament winners, 11-seeded NC State. NC is the lowest seed still remaining in the tournament, followed by Clemson. Quickly, let's run through these upcoming games. Clemson will face number 2-seeded Arizona. San Diego State will face UConn in a national championship rematch. Alabama will face UNC. Illinois will face off against Iowa State. NC State will face Marquette. Gonzaga will face Purdue. Duke will face Houston. Houston actually almost lost to a Texas A&M after a late comeback leading to a buzzer-beater 3 to send it to overtime, where Houston would manage to still hold on. Finally, Tennessee will face Creighton. On the women's side, Audie Crooks had a story to tell in the first round as the Iowa State big rallied her team to a 20-point comeback and 40 points of her own. Unfortunately, she would go 3 for 21 in the next round, resulting in an overtime loss against Stanford. Big Ten regular season champs, the Ohio State Buckeyes, were a top dog all season long. Duke did not seem to care as they knocked off the 2-seeded Buckeyes in what was Ohio State Stars point guard J.C. Sheldon's final game. Undefeated South Carolina are still dominating as well, as 1-seeded Texas Clayton Clark and the Iowa Hawkeyes pulled out a 64-54 victory to advance to the Sweet 16. Oregon State will face Notre Dame, Indiana will face undefeated South Carolina, NC State will match up against 2-seeded Stanford, and Gonzaga will face Texas. Haley Van Lith and Angel Reese and the LSU Tigers will face UCLA. Colorado will face Iowa, Baylor will go up against USC, and finally Duke will go against UConn. That was just the kickoff, but not an onside, or else I'll have to inform the defense. 2 rules changes have been enforced, with onside kicks now having to be announced to the receiving team. Hip drop tackles have also been banned and will result in a 15-yard penalty. Multiple players have left remarks on the changes via social media. Star retired edge rusher J.J. Watt said, and I quote, "Just put the belts with the flags on," end quote, sharing his opinion on this tackle rule. The college hockey seasons are in their respective tournaments. The women's tournament has recently finished with the 1-seeded Ohio State Buckeyes dominating their way to be crowned national winners. They knocked off Wisconsin with a final score of 1-0. On the men's side, the regional semifinals are soon to be played. Some heavy favorites are the Big Ten winners, Michigan State, and the 31-5 Boston College. College hockey is a really unique sport, so anything can happen. NBA and NHL are soon hitting postseason form, while the NBA will have its opening day this week. A lot is happening, and I'm excited for it. That's all for me. Now let's send it back to Nat at the desk.
Thanks, Matt. Over the weekend, the NCAA tournament held their first and second rounds across the country for the Men's National Championship Tournament. Let's send things to Jacob Kubik for an inside look at how our brackets are doing.
Thanks, Nat. The first weekend of the men's tournament was, well, madness. However, it was not the madness that we have become accustomed to. All four of the 1 and 2 seeds made it to the Sweet 16, which was the first time that has happened since 2019. Here in our group, 4 brackets had their champions lose, 3 of them in the first round. 14-seed Oakland's upset win over 3-seed Kentucky was a pick that no bracket correctly predicted, and it was arguably the biggest upset in the first round. 13-seed Yale's late push over 4-seed Auburn was a close second. Joey Bova is currently leading the group with 490 points. However, he has a max point total of 1,050 points since his champion Duquesne lost in the second round. Jake Levinsky and Matt Palangi are tied in second with 450 points, with Jake holding a tiebreaker since Purdue is still alive. Nick Schermetto and Hannah Bezet round out the top 5 with 440 and 430 points respectively, and also have 2 of the top max point values remaining. Mike Hodges, Natalia Hillen, Faith Miller, and Gabe Ebersol are the remaining brackets with over 400 points through 2 rounds. Jacob Kubik, Jake Bell, Bryn Rees, and Ryan Thiele all stood over 100 points from the leader, with their champion still alive in the Sweet 16. The bracket is only going to heat up with Sweet 16 and Elite 8 matchups, and I'll be back to recap the chaos with our brackets next week. Back to Nat at the desk.
Thanks, guys. After the break, we discuss the Pirates and MLB opening day in Case of the Week. Stay tuned.
It's a tough crowd.
Welcome back to Case of the Week. This week, I'm joined by Mike, Peyton, and Ryan, and we're here to discuss what we think of the MLB season this year. So, guys, we're going to start off with general MLB, or you can start off with your favorite team or the Pirates, our home team. Mike?
Well, I'm going to start off with the Pirates here, and I think this will be a better year than last year. They had 76 wins, and they had some key injuries at the start of the season that really hindered their play towards the back half. But I think they could actually do some damage in a somewhat weak NL Central, okay? Last year, the Cardinals, they completely botched everything up. They were supposed to be a perennial contender, and they just weren't. And the Cubs, you know, were all right, average at best. But I think the Pirates can actually win some games, especially getting O'Neal Cruz back in the lineup. I think he adds at least 10 more wins, and that might be enough for the Pirates to make a playoff push.
Wow. I don't know about 10 more wins. I mean, Cruz is a special talent, but he still has yet to prove it in the major leagues. And obviously last year he had the very unfortunate injury. Yes, now with O'Neal Cruz, they won 76 games. You'd think, right, they'd win 4, 5, I don't know about 10, but maybe 3 or 4 more wins with that. But this offseason was so critical, and to me, the front office did not do their job, as usual. And I know that they don't spend a lot of money, but your biggest issues were first base and starting pitching. And I don't want to hear about how, oh, Paul Skeens is going to be coming up and this guy's going to be coming up. The fact that Bailey Falter is in the starting rotation is completely unacceptable. And they have Luis Ortiz in the bullpen, who they've been working on and developing. And that's the problem with the Pirates. Not only do they not spend, they're bad at player development. We've seen it with so many pitchers over the years. The fact that they think Bailey Falter is a better starting pitching rotation option than Luis Ortiz is a huge problem. You tell me you haven't been able to develop Ortiz. I mean, I get, and I think that's going to be their main issue is can they survive the first 2 months of the season with the starting pitching that they have? I like Martin Perez. I like that pickup. Marco Gonzalez looks like a complete disaster right now. And then you have Mitch Keller, and thank goodness they let Jared Jones pitch. I think he's going to be a big help. But the starting pitching is what wins you games. And I'm not very optimistic about the start. It might take them a while to figure that out once Skeens comes up. So.
So, and iterate, but the thing about I think we're going to be fine the first couple months like how we do every year. We're going to be fine at the beginning. And then once we start to hit the dog days of June, getting a lot on the All-Star break, I think that's when we're going to start seeing what our starting lineup can do. And by then, I'll hope Paul Skeens is up by then, but I doubt he's going to be up by the All-Star break. I think they're going to keep him in AAA as long as they can, kind of like what they did with O'Neal Cruz when everyone was calling for O'Neal to come up. They're going to do the same thing, try to get more time in his contract by keeping him in AAA. I mean, I don't expect Paul Skeens to be up much this year, if anything. But again, same probably been about the past so many years. Our starting pitching, we have one or two good pitchers on that starting rotation. We have a deep bullpen, which is nice to have for once.
We do have some injuries to start the season, but some guys will be back.
All right, I'm going to have to make some arguments here for both of those points. I'm going to start with you, Peyton. You said O'Neal Cruz isn't that type of guy. I think he is at least a 10-win player that can add 10 more wins. He's a 5-tool player that can basically do it all. And we saw that in the first week. He was one of the reasons why they got off to that hot start. He is just that type of guy who can really wreak damage on the bases. He can hit for power. His eye has gotten better. He can get on base now. I think he can really do it all. And for your point, Ryan, I think if the Pirates can stay in contention to June, that's where the Super 2 is going to come into play. And I think that's when they're going to call up Paul Skeens. I wish they can do it sooner, but he is already ready now. He's 25 years old. They got to bring him up. He is ready to go.
I'm not saying he isn't ready to go because we all know he's ready to go. I mean, if you're consistently throwing 102 mile an hour in your first coming out of spring, that's impressive because no one really does it coming out of spring anymore. I mean, he is ready. It's just the fact of our franchise will actually do their jobs for once and step up and pull him up.
And I think it's the right decision to keep him down because a player like Skeens, if he's going to be the ace pitcher, one of the faces of your franchise, you want to get as much time with him as possible, especially if he's going to be a $200, $300 million contract kind of player. The Pirates aren't going to be able to afford that. But I agree. And here's the other thing. He's only had 6 innings of minor league. I know we think he's a superhero, but he's only had 6 innings of minor league pitching, right? So get him some experience in AAA. And if he smokes through AAA, then bring him up. If he struggles, keep him down. But that's why they're relying on all these young pitchers. You could have got Michael Lorenzen for $4.5 million. And they refuse to add that extra starting pitcher to sit behind Mitch Keller, and I think that's going to hurt them. But the good news for the Pirates is I think with their young core, they're going to get better this year as the season goes on. I think it's going to be the opposite of last year. But you don't want to start off too poorly, and the way this roster looks to start the season, especially with the injuries in the bullpen, it's not looking good. So you can't start out like 5-15, or you're towards a bad trajectory.
Well, while I agree with you on those points, I'm going to also have to make the counter argument that ownership expects them to compete. And if you are expecting to compete, then you got to bring Skeens up and let him pitch. It doesn't matter. That's the bottom line. He is ready now, and if you expect to compete, that's not what I'm saying. That is what Bob Nutten is saying. Show that you are actually willing to compete. And I agree, they do need to make some better signings. Again, we got a Daniel Vogelbach 2.0 and Rowdy Tellez, a guy that can get on base. But at the same time, if you are expecting to compete, you got to bring up Skeens now.
So you're saying he should be on the opening day roster?
I say so. I think so.
Yeah, I think what they should have done is sign some people and made sure that Skeens, and I agree with Keith because you want to have him for down the line. You don't want to, and he's only had 6 innings of minor league pitching. That's my thing. I want to see what he can do for a month in AAA
And also,
at least.
Nutten is a top 10 owner in salary in terms of how much money he has at his disposal. So, we're in the bottom 10 in terms of spending money. So if you want to actually make a splash, forego one of the years of the Super 2 for Paul Skeens if you're really that hesitant on paying him money.
Mikey, you're saying the same thing we've all been saying for the past how many years about Bob Nutten. He's just not going to spend that money for his players. I mean, as much as we need to at least buy at least a third starter, because again, to be good in the MLB, you got to have at least 3 good starters for even when you get into the playoffs, if we get to the playoffs. When you get in the dog days of August, June, July, when the season starts really picking up and around there, you need 3 good starters, and he's not going to spend the money for that third guy.
I mean, I agree with that point. I mean, Mitch Keller, he's a 1 on this team, but on a lot of teams, he's their 2 or 3. And I think when Paul Skeens does come up, he'll be the 1, and Keller will assert himself as the 2.
I think the 2 biggest factors for the Pirates season this year that is going to really tell the tale on how this season is going to play out is O'Neal Cruz and especially Brian Reynolds. Brian Reynolds had, in terms of his play, an abysmal season last year in terms of his pay and what he got for a team that doesn't spend a lot, and you're going to pay him. Abysmal in terms of how much he got paid by Bob Nutton.
He's not getting paid that
much. But
much.
Nutton doesn't spend that much money. So when he makes a sign like that, at least you're going to show it. Because guess what? If you don't, Nutton's going to back out of his contract.
What's a good stat line for Brian Reynolds?
For Brian Reynolds, I think you got to at least bat 280 at the minimum and have at least 25 homers and 80 RBIs in terms of his play.
Well.
Especially if you're the guy, you got to put up at least numbers like that.
Because we paid Kiki Brian Hayes all that money, and then he couldn't hit for at least a good 3 portions of our season.
Yeah.
So he has to have an exceptional year for Bob Nutton to keep spending the money and not be short-staffed to not be short to spend the money.
And if Reynolds doesn't play well, it just gives Nutton another reason on not to spend money. So I think this really hinders on his play. If he's going to do good, it might give Nutton another reason, hey, like I'm actually spending money and the players are actually putting in the numbers.
Yeah, I'm not too concerned about Brian Reynolds. I do think about Key Brian Hayes. He's going to have a bounce back year. He turned his corner towards the end of the year with his swing. I think he's going to be a 20-homer guy and a 270-plus hitter. And that's, I mean, we really haven't had that at third base since Pedro Alvarez, although he didn't really hit for high average, but he had a lot of power.
In terms of Gold Glove, you could say Jack Wilson at shortstop. I think he has one of the best gloves in the game, and like you said, if he just keeps the hitting up, watch out because he can be a perennial all-star.
And my one other thing I want to mention is Alika Williams is on the roster, and Liover Peguero is not. I mean, Alika Williams cannot, I don't know, he couldn't hit a beach ball. I mean, the guy is not a good hitter. And I understand that Triolo needs to play, but you should have moved Triolo to first because Tellez is not a good option. They could have signed more at first, but a better option at first. But we'll see what happens.
Well, each season is a new season, and I'm excited to see what the Pirates have to offer this season, guys. Thank you. Well, that's all the time that we have this week. Be sure to join us next week at the same Pioneer time, the same Pioneer channel, and the same Pioneer Sideline.